formats. We have Alex Stokes. What would it be a day without a conversation on AI? And so here we are. If you haven't talked to Alex, hopefully I can share this. I haven't seen his eyes light up so big when he gets to talk about these subjects, so he's quite excited. He still loves Ethereum, he has told me that, but this is near and dear to his heart. So with that, Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, Drew helped me come up with the title here, Gwei GPT. Pretty catchy. Okay, hang on, let me. Okay, it should work. Yeah, so this talk today is like kind of more speculative. It's more just reflecting on the transaction supply chain that I think everyone here knows quite well. And at the same time, we have this whole thing of AI, LLMs. I was actually just talking to some developers yesterday, and the question was like, basically like who uses AI? Of course, everyone put their hand up, and then we drilled down into like different tools we use and kind of did a survey. TLDR, like we are using this stuff, and that I think we can assume this because especially if you're here, you're kind of on the frontier. But that being said, I do think things will change radically. I think they've already started to change, and as you'll see, kind of a core message is we're in this fast takeoff regime. People even go so far as to say super exponential. So things are going to change, and I wanted to at least reflect a bit on the transaction supply chain today, and maybe just offer some ideas, some prompts, ironically enough, for how that might impact the stuff we think about in this room. So it's maybe more speculative, but it might be interesting to stimulate some thought. So to start off, basically what I just said. So AI is happening. There's this notion of like fast takeoff, where not only will these AI get better, but as they get better, they can in turn make themselves better, and you hit this recursive loop where the future will be wild. So because of that, I think everything will be touched, like anything you can think of in the world on this planet, and one day more planets. But that includes Ethereum. So we can use the transaction supply chain. That phrase is a mouthful. The transaction supply chain as a lens to think about some of these things. Okay, let me run through this. So in terms of AI, like we have AI and Ethereum, okay? So AI, what does that do? I think the most compressed way to put this is that it gives you leverage, and if you know what that word means, then it's like useful communication. If you don't, then maybe not. But one way to think about this is like the more compute you have to throw at some problem, the more things you can do. And this is actually historically this has always been the case. Like this is why people like really like computers and why we've seen them so much in society is like they just extend your abilities. AI supercharges this, and in particular, you can generate like pretty much literally whatever, whenever. Again, as long as you have access to these models. And this is going to make the world a very interesting place over, say, the next 10 years. At the same time, we have blockchains. That's why we're here. And like a helpful analogy here is kind of thinking about them in the way that, we have this story that there is at least sort of the American West, the frontier. People would go and try to like find plots of land and like stake their claim in the world. And a technology that actually helped develop this whole thing was, it sounds pretty simple, but the barbed wire fence. And it was just simply because you could actually like mark off plots of land and say, this is mine. So similarly, the analogy I'm trying to paint here is that AI is going to like just generate like infinite amounts of digital real estate is maybe one way to think about it. Blockchains are cool because they let you put these like very hard fixed boundaries in place that you otherwise wouldn't have. And it's kind of this notion of like, the world's like becoming very uncertain and hard. It's like it becomes harder and harder to know like what's real and what's not. With blockchains, which again combine cryptography and incentives in this very nice way, they give you some way to start making sense of the digital landscape. Yeah, I'll touch a bit on risk later, but like this is just worth calling out now that the way systems work, you can do more with more hardware, more compute, and there are centralization risk here. We just saw some in the last talk in terms of how things actually work in the world with Ethereum and again the transaction supply chain. You know, the naive expectation is that this will just get worse, which is not great because then we lose these prior properties that should help us navigate what's coming. So here's like a very high level, almost caricature of the transaction supply chain. Again, I think most of you are familiar with this, so I'll just kind of go through it pretty quickly. You can think about starting with an intent, like I want to make some swap, or I want to take out maybe some sort of collateralized loan. That then is processed by some wallet to connect you into, let's call it a solver network. Solvers then take your intents, and their whole, purpose in life is to specialize these intents into transactions. Like transactions are the thing that actually goes into the software, into the protocol. And there's like a translation step here. And the reason you might want this is because, well, first you need it because the intent, like the blockchain doesn't know what an intent is. But then separately, there's like a lot of flexibility you get with this translation layer. So then you have transactions, and sorry, with transactions, this sort of again typical or more naive model is that you have a transaction that floats out in the mempool on the internet, and then ultimately it ends up in a block. One thing we've seen with the recognition of MEV, and again, due to the efforts of many of you in this room, there's now a very sophisticated way that we can get transactions on chain. So you have transactions, they go through these parties, for example, solvers, but then also searchers. And one other thing to point out here is these boundaries are kind of blurry. Like you could maybe like solve and search at the same time. You could like search and build blocks at the same time. So they're fuzzy boundaries, but they're kind of helpful. Searchers here, just in case you don't know for some reason, the model would be that searchers now want to take multiple transactions and put them into a bundle, which is just a sort of atomic batch of transactions that then can go on chain. And because of MEV, it turns out that there's a way, like based on the transactions you have, you might be able to order them this way or that way and extract some sort of value from them. The bundle here I mentioned, just for completeness, it's just kind of, again, this way to, in this model, have searchers talk to block builders. Block builders then, again, the first order, you think about them as taking in inputs from the previous steps. They then have many bundles, they build a block, maybe also taking transactions from the plug mempool. And then that would go to the next step, to block producers, the validators of the chain. One interesting bit here I called out is proving. In terms of scaling Ethereum, we would like to move to some kind of ZK EVM regime. And provers fit into this somehow, but I won't talk about it too much, but just good to have on your radar. Okay, so there's kind of a thesis here, like what I think will happen, and then I think if you agree to this, like everything else that I say will follow as a pretty straightforward consequence. So what you have is that there will be more compute. Yeah, it's just too useful, and especially now with AI, the rate at which it is useful just increases constantly. So people will build more compute. They'll have more AI. If you have more AI, you have, well, yeah, literally more of everything else. And I do mean like everything else. It's the sense that, kind of like I said on the past slide, where you can just generate anything you want at any point in time. So you're gonna have this like deluge of content, at least on the internet. Some of it will leak over into non-internet places, but there'll be more of everything. And yeah, this will be good. Some things will be bad. And I'll unpack this later in the rest of the slides here. And this is also a key point. Again, I think most people here already know this, but the more AI you have, the more you can make better AI. And so it just accelerates this kind of loop of everything. And the key point here is, yeah, like if you accelerate everything, you're going to have more good things, but also more bad things. So just be careful. Okay, so let's look at each step of this supply chain. And yeah, if we assume this thing that will happen, we're gonna have this like fast takeoff scenario. What does that look like? So the first thing we had was intents. And yeah, I mean, this part is actually, I mean, it's just cool to think about. One way to like think about LLMs and things is they make everything an intent, right? And you see this, say, if like you're vibe coding or something, like you don't need to go and actually like write the software yourself. You can just have the LLM do it, and it's like from a very high level description, very similar to like, oh hey, I want to like make the swap. You don't go and actually write the transaction to interact with say Uniswap. You just give it some very vague idea, sometimes too vague idea of what you want to do, and it just does it. So because of that, then I think we'll see more intents. Also, the complexity of them will go up. Today, maybe there's like fairly simple things, but you could imagine supercharged by AI, you can, yeah, get like very complex things beyond what we have today. So that could be something for people in this room to think about is like, how can I either offer this as a service or, yeah, what kind of impacts does that have for the things I do? I guess one call out here is, yeah, like in order to do this, you'll have more complex software. And yeah, I think kind of at the end of here, I'll just sum up the fact that like there will be security considerations everywhere and it's going to be a nightmare. But this is one thing to keep in mind. Okay, so we have the intent, and then now we have the wallet. I think this will be the most like visible thing that will change because I think we'll just get rid of wallets. You'll just talk to your AI and it will do stuff for you. And it's captured by this first point. You know, there's this at this point very famous saying, "Software is eating the world." You can now say that AI is eating software. And the way to think about this is like rather than have to like even think about software as like a thing, there is software, but your AI does it for you. So like over time, you can kind of view it as the model is like there's like software that sits around the LM that helps it do stuff, helps you do stuff. If the models get more intelligent over time, there's less need for this like bespoke sort of fixed software. It just gets absorbed by the model until there's the machine god that can just do whatever you want, hopefully. And yeah, because of this, like we won't need wallets. Like, what does a wallet do? It does actually quite a lot. One thing is like key management. So now the agent will just know how to manage keys for you. It does like asset management. Like I think pretty usually you'll see there's like some kind of portfolio function in a wallet. Like you don't really need that. The LLM will just tell you when you want to know. And yeah, I guess this is captured by this last bit that there's now this notion of like software on demand, which we'll just see a lot more of. Like rather than needing like someone to make MetaMask and maintain it, like you can just make your own functions in MetaMask as you want on demand. This notion of like ephemeral software. So I do think we'll get better UX. Like if you've used any wallet software and there's like paper cuts or things that you're like, okay, why does this not work like this? That will be gone because again, you can just make it do whatever you want. But then with this like proliferation of software, we have very much have to think about security. I think even already, like who here has set up like an OpenClaw bot? Okay, I was expecting more actually, but about half the room. And yeah, already there are people in the crypto space who did this, and it's like very easy to set up a wallet and things. But then of course, a few weeks later, they got drained. Which is unfortunate, but yeah, it just speaks to the fact that we're still pretty early with all this stuff, and it's very much this notion that like capabilities are exceeding our ability to reason about them. Okay, this looks kind of dense up here. I apologize. So the next part of the stack was solvers, and again, if everything becomes an intent, there will be more intents. I think there will be a higher number of them. Probably smaller value, and this is the thing where like we can talk about induced demand and all this stuff. An example here is agentic payments, which is I know a very trendy buzzword right now. But you can imagine it's like this kind of thing, where maybe we end up in a world where there's like more of these micropayment type transactions. So you have many more of them, but they're just lower value. It won't just be for payments though, it'll be for everything. So more intense. As a solver, if you have more intents, you'll need a couple of things. Like one of them is you'll need more compute yourself to solve these intents. So start buying hardware. That's actually probably my only recommendation out of the stock is just buy more hardware. But yeah, so you'll need more compute for this to in turn solve this like again deluge of intents. This one, yeah, like I think this is interesting. I haven't thought about it as deeply, and maybe people in here, have, and I would like to hear. But ultimately, yeah, like I think, what we'll be able to do more easily is have very complex intents beyond what we can do today. Because again, like even in like a very basic understanding, you don't need to like, sort of understand how to parse a very small set of intents. You can just have this be a very generic thing that the LLM will just solve in real time. And I thought this was kind of a cute example. And the limit, like where this goes, is like you could even have your AI generate whatever smart contract you need, and like on like just in time to do arbitrary computation on chain. And there's a whole question of like, are we solving on chain or not? But for the things that we do solve on chain, the flexibility is now. There was like there's like a ceiling on the complexity we could reason about, and the ceiling is now gone. Yeah. And another example here, like just to call this out, like you can almost kind of think of like payment channels and state channels as these almost like bespoke solving arrangements, where again, like rather than me ahead of time saying, okay, I'll process intents to like handle swaps. You can now just offer these like very arbitrary like computation domains, I'll call them, and it doesn't have to be as like fixed, where it's like it almost doesn't matter. Like I don't need to go and like host a server and like have all this stuff and have people come to me. You can actually instead imagine there's just like a sea of agents that are all doing this in real time amongst themselves. Okay, so next part, transactions. And so yeah, the things we've covered so far, I think we could see a way in which they could change quite a lot. With transactions, these are like fixed things like the protocol defines, and so I think, a priori wouldn't expect too much change here, but we'll see. So in terms of impacts, like we can think there will probably be more transactions. And again, it's kind of from the last slide, like you'll have more, maybe lower value, so who knows in terms of like, I guess value captured or whatever, it might kind of end up with the same. But we'll see. And again, micropayments here are like the canonical example where you might have many more of these things, but yeah, they're lower value, just to finish the thought. So with more transactions, again, more compute. I think that's probably what I'm gonna end up saying the most during this talk is just more compute. And yeah, like I did, it's easy to think about these transaction types as being very fixed. They're like defined things in the protocol. If you want to change them, you have to change the protocol, which is like way harder than you might think. But that being said, as we see this evolve, there might be patterns we want to capture. Like one way to think about it is there's ways we can either make things simpler to express or even cheaper in the protocol by enshrining them in some way. One example is batching. So I keep giving this example of like micropayments and things, and rather than have like, a million transactions that are like a millionth of a cent, you can imagine batching them somehow all into one transaction. And there's always like already you can start to do this type of thing. There might be examples like this where we want to think about new transaction types in the protocol that more directly support those, and both at L1 and L2. So it's a big world out there. Okay, next part. So we have transactions, and now searchers are trying to find transactions because that's their raison d'etre for life. And again, boundaries are blurry here, but one way to think about this is where you start to think about not just like the individual user or maybe a set of users. You now have this like much wider view of the chain or the ecosystem. And the point here is it's not just like what's necessarily in protocol, but also things that are off-chain. And this is another important point, I think, put just like tangents to crypto and AI, is that we're going to see what I'm here calling the financialization of everything. Capitalism exists, and AI just accelerates everything, so AI will accelerate capitalism. What that means then is people will try to put markets into like every last thing they can imagine. Prediction markets are an example of this, where before maybe you could be like at the bar with your friends and you're just like kind of chatting and betting on the outcome of a game. You can now go express this on like Play Market or something and like actually make a bet in a market. So we're going to see a lot more of this. I think because of this, there'll be more opportunities for MEV. And again, a key way to think about this, sort of like SexDexArb, where it's like there's this off-chain component that you can think about to influence what's on-chain, but it will be everything. Like everything will be some kind of exchange in this general sense. Again, speculative, but it is possibly the case that right now we think about like sort of short tail and long tail, however you want to call it. But basically there's like, there's a bunch of stuff, say with SexDexArb that we see and is like pretty well understood. And there's then this like long tail of MEV opportunities where it's like maybe lower volume or like more exotic types of MEV, but it's out there. And I do think again, with the forces that AI is going to sort of deliver into the world, the long tail will become much fatter, and possibly the case that like everything is long tail. Concretely, what does this mean as a searcher? More compute, there's that phrase again. So if everything is now a market and you want to like search over it, you need to then be aware of everything. So it's just a very fun infrastructure problem. And yeah, everything we've built up to so far, there's just going to be more stuff to think about, more transactions, more intents. Like this model is like kind of linear and sequential, but as many of you know in this room, there's like connections back to previous steps, and it becomes quickly this like very complex soup. Bundles here, just for completeness again. I think you get the picture. Things will get more complicated. There'll be more stuff to think about. That's pretty much all I have to say about that. The block builder. So, okay, we're now at the stage of building blocks. We somehow have like a set of transactions, and we want to make the most valuable block. Right, so again, I think ultimately this will become more complex for all the reasons given. There will be more stuff to reason about. There'll be more sort of venues, quote unquote, to reason about. There'll just be a lot more stuff. Something else I think we'll see is, generally there's already, I think, some like notions of vertical integration. This perhaps will just be accelerated. And in this world, it's just, like you can't really just like think about one thing as specialized. You now need to be aware of like a whole landscape of things, because if you don't, like your competitors will. So get busy. Again, at this point, kind of a broken record, but more inputs here, more complex optimization problem. There'll just be more stuff. And what's interesting, especially for the block building case, really all of them, but especially as we get closer to actually producing blocks, latency becomes more and more important. So not only will you have all of these problems laid out so far, you're going to need to do them very fast. Again, more compute. I'm calling this bit out. I haven't thought as much about like what the relationship of provers to builders will be. Again, with this move to zkVM, I'm just calling it out so you've heard the words if you haven't heard them before in the room. This is happening. Small question when, but it'll just be this another piece in this picture to think about. So then we get to the block producer. Again, this is the validator. I would hope this is more like the transaction as a prototype or a prototypical example, I should say, where because the behavior of it's very constrained by the protocol, it's going to be more static rather than less, but who knows? We have things like PBS or enshrined PBS that firewall off all this complexity, and I think the next segment, Drew, is with Terrence, right? Yeah, so after this, I think I'm talking with Terrence about this, so we'll say more. But ultimately, Presumably, we can find protocol constructions such that the validator can be fairly naive and not think about all of this. But what can they do? Because, there is this, again, simple cartoon of the validator in the world, but the reality is far messier, as we all know. And one thing is thinking about this power of, again, on-demand software generation, this ephemeral software. You can imagine that when validators go to select blocks today, they have a very, pretty simple algorithm. To first order, it's just who's paying me the most. From there already, we have examples where validators want extra preferences. Perhaps they care about the content of the block, or maybe the size of the block, or many things here. You can now get the vision here is almost kind of like a state channel where it's rather than me just call a static endpoint of some builder, I can now actually have some exchange brokered in real time, perhaps generated, perhaps with dynamically generated software that my LLM knows about to help me navigate all of this. Well, this last bit, again, one of the core takeaways here is there'll just be more stuff, period. Usually in this case that should imply more revenue, like more priority fees and things like this. We'll see. I believe this is the last slide, just to summarize and think about this more holistically. So, core takeaway, there'll be more AI and it's gonna make the world a crazier place. That's both good and bad. Volatility means opportunity. It can also mean risk. It becomes this dance in time to navigate it well. Because of that, there'll be more places to find a niche. Ultimately, especially given the transaction supply chain, you can view it as very competitive game. And sometimes it's hard to enter that game. And myself, many others in this room, we do actually think pretty constantly about how can we make sure this is as fair as possible. And defining fair is a whole different talk. But it's a thing we want to strive for because we do want to preserve these properties I gestured at the very beginning of the talk in terms of this technology that can put boundaries and everything else. And to get that, you do need to have a decentralized system. That being said, with more volatility here, there's going to be more opportunities, I think, to enter parts of the market. The counter prevailing force to that is, of course, that other people will also have the same technology and they'll be able to find your niche as well. So it'll be a very interesting game. But that might be an opportunity to be looking out for. And again, I could probably have a whole other talk on the risk here. One key one is that with more complexity from all of this, again, explosion of software and infrastructure and all of that, the security picture becomes much harder. We're gonna have to reason a lot more about security. I think even just this morning I saw there was a software supply chain attack, not transactions supply chain attack, but software supply chain attack with the JavaScript package. And it sounds like basically everything on the internet's hosed right now. And that's because someone was able to slip in some code that we just didn't realize, and the code is malicious, and AI accelerates all of this. So that's scary, but at least it means there's never a dull day. That was it. Thank you. I can take some questions, maybe. I don't know.
Questions? Hello, Mike. Is this working?
Hello.
Hi.
You mentioned that the security aspects of vibe-coded wallets are probably a nightmare, and I agree with that. But then on the other hand, it seems that a lot of high-profile hacks are often due to people signing transactions that I don't understand. And there I could easily imagine a way of AI actually improving it. For example, the Bybit hack, if I just have an AI that looks at every transaction before it gets signed by the wallet, I think a lot of the supply chain attacks and all of that stuff could actually be stopped. So how do you think about that? Do you think it's an unmitigated nightmare, or do you think that there might be aspects where AI actually help?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. The issue is that the attackers have the same tools. And so this is the thing where your AI is going to make sure you understand what you're signing. it won't be me, but assume some attacker has an AI and they're going to then try to trick your AI to obscure what you're signing in maybe subtle ways. Or like you could then start to like line up maybe attacks across multiple transactions you want to make. Like maybe one-off one is fine, but then there's like some little thing that slips through that then sets you up down the line for like the next time you interact with your wallet or something like this, you get wrecked. So it's not a silver bullet. Yeah, like if anything, I think what will happen is like a lot of the stuff we see today, we will be able to mitigate, minimize, but there'll be new stuff. So it's just always this cat and mouse game.
Thanks, Alex. Ken Smith here with Next Block Solutions. I really enjoyed your talk, and just a question for maybe kind of the Ethereum and the EF, right? I'm one of the ones that have already played with OpenClaw and used the packages provided by the EF to interact with Ethereum. But have you thought about, or has the EF thought about just requiring toolset? I mean, like you're producing a spec in Python code, but as part of that, just always releasing a toolset that agentic agents can use to make certain that Ethereum is the transaction rail that they go to by default?
Well, there are a couple of things there. So, okay, maybe I'll go in reverse order. Like, I very much like for Ethereum to be this go-to thing, and yeah, there's definitely a lot even people in this room need to do to make that happen. The EF can do part of that. It shouldn't be the only one. And yeah, so like there are people who do work with the EF who have produced some tooling and stuff, which I think is what you're referencing, but other people have as well. And so if anything, I'd rather have like many people all doing the same thing and adding together to this like very like flourishing open source ecosystem, rather than just be like, yeah, this is the one like canonical thing that the EF mandates or things like this. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Alex.